He grabbed my wrist before I could pull away. Not hard, not aggressive, but firm enough that I stopped moving, stopped breathing for a second. His face had gone the colour of old chalk. "Where did you get this?" he said. I looked down at the pin on my lapel, the small silver one I'd found in my grandmother's jewellery box 3 months earlier. I'd worn it because it was pretty, because it was hers, because I had almost nothing left of her. "It was my grandmother's," I said. "She passed away in February." He didn't let go right away. He stared at the pin like it had spoken to him, like it had said something I couldn't hear. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and his eyes were wet. "What was her name?" he asked. My grandmother's name was Beverly Ann Marsh, and she was, as far as anyone in our family knew, a retired postal worker from Dayton, Ohio. She'd worked the same route for 31 years. She drove a sensible car. She clipped coupons. She kept a garden of tomatoes and marigolds in the backyard, and made soup from scratch every Sunday, regardless of the season. She never talked about herself much. When you asked her questions, she had a way of turning them back around so gently you didn't even notice you'd been redirected. She was 81 years old when she died, and she died alone on a Tuesday morning in a nursing home that smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. My parents had put her there 14 months earlier. I want to be fair about this because I've spent a lot of time being unfair about it. My mother had a demanding job and 3 kids and a house that was always one crisis away from chaos. My father travelled for work. My grandmother had started forgetting things. Not dangerously, not dramatically, but enough that leaving her alone in her house in Dayton felt irresponsible. The facility they chose was rated well. It wasn't a bad place. The people there were kind to her. But nobody visited very much. That part is just true. I visited more than anyone else, and I visited maybe once every 6 or 7 weeks. I lived 4 hours away, and I told myself that was the reason. I told myself that so many times it started to feel like it wasn't an excuse anymore. She died on a Tuesday. By the time we were notified, she'd already been gone for several hours. A nurse had checked on her at 7 in the morning, and she was fine. By 9, she wasn't. I drove to Dayton for the funeral, and I was the only one who came who'd actually known her as a person rather than as a responsibility. Her neighbours from the old street sent flowers. One of them, an older woman named something I can't remember now, showed up at the graveside and cried harder than any of us did. That made me feel something I still haven't found the right word for. Afterward, I went to the facility and collected her things. There wasn't much. A cardigan she'd had for decades, a framed photo of me at about age 7, gap-toothed and squinting at something off-camera, a Bible with a cracked spine, a wooden box about the size of a shoebox, painted dark blue with a simple latch. I didn't open the box in the facility. I loaded everything into my car and drove it back to my apartment, and then I sat on my kitchen floor with the box in my lap for a long time before I opened it. Inside there were letters, maybe 20 of them, tied together with kitchen twine. Underneath the letters, a folded document that looked official and had the word "Confidential" printed across the top in faded red ink. And underneath that, a small velvet pouch. Inside the pouch was the pin. It was silver, about the size of a quarter, shaped like nothing I could immediately identify. Not a flower, not a bird. An abstract shape, almost like 2 overlapping circles, with something in the center that I couldn't make out without better light. On the back, a serial number stamped into the metal, and 2 letters, CI. I held it for a while. I put it back in the velvet pouch. I put the pouch back in the box, and I put the box on my closet shelf, and I didn't think about it much for several weeks. Then one day I was getting dressed for work, and I saw it, and I thought she wore this. Whatever it is, she wore it. I put it on. I wore it to work that day on the collar of my jacket. I didn't know what it meant. I just wanted to have something of hers close to me. I wore it for weeks after that. I almost forgot it was there. The gala was not something I'd sought out. A colleague of mine, Priya, worked part-time for a non-profit that coordinated services for veterans and their families, and every spring they held a fundraising dinner. She'd had a ticket go and used at the last minute, and she knew I didn't have plans. It was a nice venue, a hotel ballroom downtown. The kind of event with past appetizers and a silent auction and a live band playing standards. Nobody danced to. I wore a blazer. I wore the pin. I'd been there maybe 40 minutes, standing near the bar with a glass of white wine I wasn't really drinking, when I felt a hand on my arm. Not grabbing, just touching. And then the grip tightened a little, and I turned. He was in his 70s, tall, with a white crew cut and the posture of someone who'd spent decades being told to stand up straight and had never stopped. He was wearing a suit with a military service ribbon pinned above the breast pocket. His face, when I turned to look at it, was the colour of old chalk. "Where did you get this?" he said. His name was Franklin. He'd been a colonel in the army. Retired now for 12 years, doing consulting work and sitting on the board of the non-profit that was hosting the gala. He'd served in military intelligence for the majority of his career. When I told him the pin had belonged to my grandmother, Beverly Ann Marsh from Dayton, he went quiet for a long moment. He asked me how old she was when she died. He asked where she had grown up. He asked me very carefully whether she had ever mentioned working for the government in any capacity. I almost laughed. "She was a postal worker," I said. He nodded slowly, like someone confirming something he'd already suspected. "Would you be willing to talk somewhere a little quieter?" he asked. We found a small lounge off the main hallway, 2 chairs and a table with a fake orchid on it. He sat with his hands folded and he looked at the pin on my lapel for a long time before he said anything. "I can't tell you everything," he said. "Some of it I genuinely don't know. Some of it I'm not authorized to discuss even now. But I can tell you what I'm able to." I nodded. My wine glass was sweating against my palm. "The pin you're wearing," he said, "is an identification marker for a civilian intelligence corporation program that operated from the late 1960s to the mid-1990s. It's been officially inactive for about 20 years. People who participated in it were ordinary civilians, teachers, business owners, tradespeople, who had access to specific communities or locations and were willing to pass information to federal contacts on an ongoing basis. They were not spies in the theatrical sense. They didn't carry weapons or use false names. They lived their regular lives. But the work they did was real, and in some cases it was critical." I stared at him. "Postal workers," he said, "had an obvious utility, access to a very wide range of locations, documents, packages, regular contact with a very large number of people. A 31-year career on the same route meant a level of community knowledge that was genuinely difficult to replicate by any other means." I put my wine glass down on the table. I put it down very carefully because my hands were not entirely steady. "You're telling me," I said, "that my grandmother—" "I'm telling you," he said, "that the pin you're wearing is not decorative. It was issued. The CI marking stands for Civilian Intelligence. Every person in the program received one. Most of them never talked about it. That was the arrangement." I drove home from the gala, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I went inside. I kept thinking about a specific memory. A Sunday when I was maybe 9 years old, and I was sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table while she made soup, and I asked her if she'd ever wanted to do something exciting with her life. I don't know why I asked. Kids say things. She didn't answer right away. She was stirring something, looking down into the pot, and she was quiet for so long that I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. Then she said, without looking up, "Who decides what's exciting, sweetheart?" I didn't know what to say to that. She changed the subject. We ate soup. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. I thought about it all the way home, and I thought about it while I stood in my kitchen and opened the wooden box again. The letters were not addressed to anyone. They were not signed with a full name. The handwriting was my grandmother's. I recognized it from birthday cards, but the content was careful and precise in a way her birthday cards never were. Locations, dates, names I didn't recognize, references to things I couldn't decode. One of them mentioned a specific address on a street in a suburb of Dayton, and described the activity at that address over a period of several weeks, with the kind of detail that could only come from daily repeated observation. She had documented everything. She had kept copies, apparently, of some portion of her work. Whether she was supposed to or not, I had no idea. I read every letter twice. I put them back in the box. I didn't sleep well. I called Franklin 3 days later. He'd given me a business card. He answered on the second ring. I told him I'd read the letters. I described them as generally as I could without reading from them. He listened without interrupting. The copies she kept, he said finally, were a risk she took on her own. That was against protocol. But a lot of people in the program kept something. I think it was the only way to hold on to the sense that it mattered when they could never tell anyone. She couldn't tell anyone, I said. Not a question. Just saying it out loud. No, he said, not a family member, not a friend, no one. I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the times I'd sat across from her and thought I knew her and thought I was bored and thought I'd rather be somewhere else. All the times my parents had made decisions about her care and her life as though her only relevant quality was her age. I thought about the nursing home and the Tuesday morning, and a nurse checking on her at 7, and the hours that followed. Did she have a handler? I asked. Someone she reported to? I can look into that, he said. I can't promise I'll find anything. He did find something. Her contact for most of the program's duration had been a federal agent who retired in the early 2000s. That agent was deceased, but Franklin, through channels he didn't fully explain to me, was able to obtain a brief summary record, heavily redacted, he warned me, but real, that documented Beverly Ann Marsh's participation in the program from 1971 to 1993. 22 years. She'd started when she was 39 years old. She'd retired from the program when she was 60, citing age and reduced route access as her reasons. The summary noted her record as consistent and reliable. That was the language. Consistent and reliable. I called my mother after I got off phone with Franklin. I told her what I'd found. I told her about the gala, about Franklin, about the pin, about the letters, about the summary record. I told her all of it as clearly and as carefully as I could. My mother was quiet for a long time, long enough that I checked twice to see if the call had dropped. I didn't know any of this, she said. I know. She never said anything. I know. Another silence. She was alone, my mother said, and her voice was different now, smaller. At the end. She was alone, and I didn't realize. She was alone, and I didn't realize. She was alone, and I agreed. I didn't say the rest. I didn't need to. My mother cried. It was the first time in my adult life I'd ever heard her cry on the phone. Not the gentle kind. The other kind, the kind that catches in your chest and won't stop. I didn't cry right then. I'd done that already, alone in my apartment at 11 o'clock at night with the wooden box open on my kitchen table. By the time I called my mother, I had already been through it. I held the phone and listened to her, and I thought about my grandmother at her kitchen stove, stirring soup, answering a question from a 9-year-old about what counts as an exciting life. There is a veterans memorial garden about 20 minutes from where I live. It's not a famous place. It's a small park with benches and stone markers and a flagpole. I'd driven past it dozens of times. I went there about 3 weeks after the gala. It was a Tuesday afternoon, overcast, mid-March, nobody else around. I sat on one of the benches near the flagpole, and I had the wooden box in my bag, and I just sat there. I'm not entirely sure what I was looking for. Permission, maybe, or just a place that felt appropriate for thinking about someone who had served in a way that meant no one could publicly acknowledge it. My grandmother was not a soldier. She never fired a weapon. She never left Dayton. What she did was carry mail and watch and remember and report quietly for 22 years, and then stop and keep the secret for the rest of her life. She did it alone. She probably did it without knowing whether it mattered or not, without any feedback, without any recognition, without even the ability to ask someone else if she was doing the right thing. She watered her tomatoes. She made her soup. She came to my birthday parties and gave me books I didn't always read and asked me questions I didn't always answer honestly. She was patient in a way I didn't understand then, and I'm only beginning to understand now. I took the pin out of my bag and held it in my palm. It had cost her something. I knew that much. Not money, something else. The ability to be fully known by the people she loved. You can't carry a secret that significant for that long without it taking up space, without it pushing other things out. My grandmother had been warm, but she had also been, I realized now, always at some distance, always a half step behind a door that didn't fully open. I had assumed it was just her personality. It was probably also this. I thought about what Franklin had said. Most of them kept something, because it was the only way to hold on to the sense that it mattered. She had kept the pin. She had kept the letters. She had kept them in a dark blue box that she brought with her to the nursing home, that she presumably looked at sometimes in that room by herself. That she left for no one in particular because there was no one she could explain it to. She left it, and I found it, and now I knew. I put the pin back in the velvet pouch. I put the pouch in the box. I latched the box. Then I went home and I started making calls. It took 2 months. Franklin helped. He knew people in the relevant offices, understood the bureaucratic language, was able to translate what I wanted into terms that made sense to the people who could do something about it. What I wanted was simple, actually. I didn't want a parade or a public ceremony. I didn't want my family's neglect reframed as something other than what it was. I just wanted her name on something, somewhere official, somewhere real. The Department of Defense has a process, not widely known, for posthumous recognition of civilian program participants whose service records meet certain criteria. It's not public. You don't get a ceremony at the White House or a headline in the newspaper. What you get is a letter, and an official certificate, and a flag that is folded in a particular way and given to next of kin. Beverly Ann Marsh's file was reviewed. Her record, consistent and reliable, 22 years, met the criteria. I drove back to Dayton on a Friday afternoon in May. The ceremony, such as it was, happened in my parents' living room. A representative from the Regional Veterans Affairs Office drove in from Columbus. Franklin came, which surprised me. He didn't have to. My mother had set out coffee and her good dishes even though it wasn't a meal. She'd framed the photograph of my grandmother that I'd found in her things, the one with me at 7 years old, and put it on the mantel. My father stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, and the expression of a man who is trying very hard to hold himself together. The representative read the citation. He said my grandmother's name clearly and correctly. He said she had served with distinction, that her work had been part of operations that remained classified, but that her contribution was documented, acknowledged, and valued by her country. He folded the flag. He handed it to my mother. My mother received it with both hands. She pressed it against her chest, and she stood there for a long moment with her eyes closed, and she didn't say anything at all. I stood in the corner, and I watched, and I thought, this is late. This is too late for her to know about it, and too late to change what happened, and too late for her to hear her name said out loud in a room with people who loved her. But it was not nothing. I still have the wooden box. I still have the letters inside it, the document with the faded red ink, the velvet pouch. I still have the pin. I don't wear it much any more. It's not mine to wear, not really. But I take it out sometimes and hold it, and I think about a woman who spent 31 years walking the same streets in Dayton, Ohio, carrying other people's mail, watching, remembering, saying nothing. I think about the soup, the marigolds, the way she used to redirect questions back at me so gently I didn't notice. I think about what it cost to carry something quietly, for a very long time. What it costs and what it means and what you hold on to when you can't hold on to anything else. I still don't know if my family will ever fully make peace with how the end of her life went. I don't think there's a version of that story where we come out looking good, or where regret stops feeling like what it is. I think we'll carry that. I think that's appropriate. But I know who she was now. That part is mine. She didn't need anyone to know. She never asked for it, never hinted at it, never let herself be bitter about the invisibility of it. She just did the work and came home and made Sunday soup and sat across the table from her granddaughter and listened to small talk about small things and loved us with whatever space was left over after she had given everything else away. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the certificate, not the flag, not the citation read aloud in a living room in Dayton. Just her, at the stove. Just the soup. Just the way she looked at me when I asked her a question she couldn't answer and chose to answer it anyway, in the only way she was able to. Who decides what's exciting, sweetheart? She did, quietly, without permission, without recognition, for longer than I've been alive. I just wish I'd known to say thank you. I've thought a lot about what causes what in a life, not in a mystical sense, just the plain, mechanical truth of it, that the things we do or don't do tend to produce outcomes that are completely proportional to the choices that preceded them. My family didn't visit my grandmother much, not because they were cruel people, because they were busy, because they told themselves the facility was good, because distance becomes habit faster than closeness does. And so she died alone on a Tuesday morning, and the guilt that followed was also completely proportional. You can't skip the cause and complain about the effect. That's not how any of this works. What I keep thinking about is Beverly, though not what happened to her, but what she chose. She chose, for 22 years, to do something that mattered while pretending to do something ordinary. She could have been bitter about the invisibility. She had every reason to be. She worked her route, documented what she saw, passed it along, and went home and made soup and showed up to birthday parties and never asked for anything in return. The cause there was discipline. The effect was a kind of integrity that doesn't need an audience to be real. That's not luck. That's a decision made over and over again, quietly, without applause. I think about what that requires. It requires knowing the difference between doing something because it will be recognized and doing it because it needs doing. Most of us never fully separate those two things. We want acknowledgement. We shape our behavior around what will be seen. Beverly, whatever the external reasons for her secrecy, ended up living as though the work itself was enough. I don't know if she started out that way or if she grew into it over decades, but she got there. And I think about Franklin, a man who didn't have to come to Dayton, didn't have to drive to a living room in Ohio to watch a flag get folded for a woman he never met. He came because he understood something about what it costs to serve without recognition, and he thought it mattered to close that gap, even late, even imperfectly. That's what good judgment looks like to me. Not grand gestures, just showing up when you understand the weight of something. The lesson I keep coming back to is not about secrets or military programs or any of that. It's about what you're willing to carry and how you carry it. Beverly carried a significant thing for a very long time without letting it make her smaller or more closed or less present with the people around her. She still made the soup. She still showed up. She still loved us with what was left over. That takes something most people underestimate. Not bravery in the dramatic sense, but a steadiness that doesn't require conditions. I didn't have that steadiness when it came to her. I let convenience become habit, and I let habit become neglect, and I am going to have to live with that. What I can do now is understand it clearly and not look away from it. That's the start of something, I think. Not redemption exactly, just honesty. Just deciding that the next person I love is not going to wonder whether I'll show up. That's what she left me. Not the pin, not the letters, not the flag folded on my mother's mantle. The question of whether I'm willing to do the quiet work. Whether I can do something that matters without needing anyone to notice. Whether I can love someone all the way, instead of most of the way. Most of the time. I'm still working on the answer, but at least now I know the question is there.